Duany, Plater, Zyberk and Company, and Marcella will do the introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. Marcella Camblor, Project Director with 750 for the record. I have the pleasure to introduce to you today Andres Duany, Architect and Town Planner, Principal of Duany, Plater, Zyberk, who with Dover Cole and Partners are leading the consultant team for 750. For those of you who have been around the region for a while, you may remember that back in 1988, this council, you, together with the city of Stuart and visionary Mayor Joan Jefferson back then, hired the firm of Duany, Plater, Zyberk to create a long-term redevelopment plan for downtown Stuart. It was the first ever public charrette. They also did a code which was the precursor of the form-based codes, and to this day, I believe, Mayor, they call them the Duany Plan and the Duany Code, and they were very good at guiding Stuart through redevelopment and through these years, and the city has continued that tradition of planning over the years. So, Andres is very familiar with the history, the local history, the history of the region. They have done a lot of work, not only in the Treasure Coast region in South Florida, throughout the state, throughout the country, and nationally, and also internationally. And with that, they're helping the team, they're assisting the public, they're leading the conversation on what we need to do, how we can become as a region more resilient and more competitive, but most importantly, how we can retain local control through the introduction of the concept of subsidiarity, which you've all been introduced to in a few meetings. So with that, I'll introduce Andres. Andres is going to speak from the podium in the back to address all the public. So if you don't mind, as he sets up all of you that are sitting there, just turn your chairs over a little bit. So thank you very much, and then we'll open it up for questions in the end.
I'm told that I have 45 minutes and that there will be 15 minutes of questions and answers. And so I am going to try to be as succinct and as effective as possible. And that will cause me to skip detail and get on to concept. Now, the people involved in this magnificent endeavor, which is 750, are many of them working on a daily basis. I am not. My practice takes me away all too often, and it's actually the younger people in all the offices involved that keep track of the details. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't speak on the detail. Also, it's not useful to have one other person speaking on details because the vision is so large that it actually requires a certain degree of abstraction, and that's what I want to speak about today. To be effective, this plan has to get, and one can say, well, and I think several of you have asked, why do we need a plan like this? To be effective, this plan has to transcend the local and transcend the temporal. This is not about today, and it is not about how we see ourselves. We have government and levels of government that actually take care of all sorts of local concerns. This is for a level which is called the mega region, which is the scale at which you will compete in the future. Okay? You've heard of globalization. In globalization, what is falling out is the nations. The nations are less important. What are falling out are the cities, except unless you're a very large city, the cities become unimportant. What is effective are the regions. And I think we've already heard about what's happening in the Northwest, the so-called Cascadia. Cascadia is a series of cities, including one in Canada, Vancouver, Portland, and Seattle, that have their own foreign policy. They're negotiating directly with Asia. And then you have the fabulous Texas duo, which are, Houston and Dallas, that are having a foreign policy that deals directly with Mexico. You, of course, have the old New England, which we know, is in some ways is kind of decrepit in terms of industrial production. But its relationship to Europe, particularly intellectually, is absolutely transparent. And then you have the Washington Corridor and so forth. What happens in this world is that if you want to have a farming policy, which was mentioned this morning, you can't pick up the phone and say, we are this county, and have anybody pick up the phone in Washington. Now, if you can say, well, we are the 7 counties of the 750 regional plan, anyone in the world will pick up the phone and help negotiate the agricultural policy with Colombia. See? And of course, you're thinking at this moment I can pick up the phone. But in 50 years, you can't pick up the phone. In 50 years, we need to work at the mega region. And I'll show you a slide here about the mega regions that are in formation. Okay? So if I sound a little bit odd, it's because I'm thinking 50 years out. And it takes a discipline to do that. I have turned the disadvantage of not being here all the time and tracking this closely into an advantage. As I travel, I look at places and I see it from the point of view of what can we learn for 750. And I have 5 or 6 anecdotes that as I was walking around I'd like to share with you, because it's really what I'm thinking about and what this presentation is about. The first one is not too far away. The first one is when I was asked to do the master plan for Mobile, Alabama, and I said, well, why is Mobile waking up? Because they got the Airbus factory. The Airbus factory, the Boeing, the second Boeing, is 2 miles from downtown. And of course, the Germans have arrived, the French have arrived. They're reforming the educational system from top to bottom. They're not going to put up with American education for the kids. They want German education. And they're willing to fly the school teachers over to Germany and to fly the German school teachers over here. And the whole place is so incredibly alive. And so I look at the waterfront and I see a shipyard called Austal. Austal, the most advanced military shipyard in the world. There are 2 boats being built here that look like Star Wars. You've never seen anything like it. And it's in Alabama. And I say, what did you do to deserve this? And of course they say, and then there's BMW and Toyota and everything else. What did you do to deserve this? And they said, we are able to move in an agile way. We can negotiate with anybody. So then I'm doing the master plan for Mobile and Escambria County. I believe that's the county, is the county immediately to the east of it. They say, well, I'm being interviewed, and they say, could we, we'd like to catch all the suppliers. We'd like, we're so close, we'd like to actually start the factories and that supply Airbus. And so I go back, I'm crossing the border back and forth, and I'm asking, well, when do you need to have supplies ready? And I come back and I report, there's absolutely no way that anything in Florida, that any supplier is going to occur in Florida, because you can't get a permit soon enough. You cannot get a permit in Florida in such a way. In other words, what I'm saying is, in Alabama, you can build an entire airplane factory, and you cannot get a permit in Florida to supply the tires or the small parts. Okay, it's an absolutely asymmetrical situation. Second thing, I just came back yesterday from a place called High Point, North Carolina, very famous. It's where all the quality furniture is made, all of it. And so I show up and it's closed, completely closed. And I said, well, what happened here? The neutron bomb? And by the way, it's very well maintained, very well maintained. People are killing weeds, you know, maintenance crews everywhere, absolutely closed. What happened was that about 6 years ago, the Chinese came and bought all the companies and took all the production to China. Now notice what's happening. They didn't drive the companies down, which is the old competition, which takes years. They didn't drive the companies out of business. They just came up, bought the companies and shut them. It's incredibly aggressive what's happening, incredibly aggressive. And of course we say, well, why can't we do that? Well, we can't do that because you can't apply a coat of shellac without consulting with the EPA. Okay? Well, the Chinese can produce and produce and produce. It was absolutely shocking. By the way, unusually, the wealth was left behind because they bought the companies. They didn't bankrupt the companies. So what is to be done about High Point? Well, it turns out that High Point, by virtue of geography, is the center of so many colleges that within 75 minutes drive, there are 336,000 students. 336,000 students. Unbelievable. Famous universities, huge universities. Within 60 minutes drives, there's 220,000 students. And they can't, and the state can't keep them. They can't keep them. So I said, well, there's nothing to be done. I began the charrette that we just finished, a 10-day charrette. I began to gather the students and gather the students and gather the students. Incredible energy. And the story from beginning to end was, we can't start a business. We can't start a business. The minute we identify cheap space, which is a loft, and that's all that's necessary to start a business. The energy, the education, and cheap space, the permits land on it, and by the time you're done with the sprinklers, by the way, in a building that has not burnt for 100 years, okay, with woodworking, by the time you get the permits, it's an expensive building. And of course, because the real estate value is so low, it is completely incapable, it is impossible to, and so on an emergency basis, we're passing something called the Code Pink. Okay, and the city manager wants to pass, we just finished this charrette on Friday, he wants it, it's an interim code that permits people to act. And the reference to Code Pink is to reduce red tape. It's all about reducing red tape so that people can get on with it. Now, to what point are we going to reduce red tape? What are we shooting for? 1970. We're going to reduce red tape to the time at which I was able to start a business without working for anybody. And this is beyond, we're going to have pre-permitted forms, we're going to have, I mean, there's a whole series of analogies which I think are a multiplication of something like the free zone. And it has to do with the ability to start businesses because it really is economic. And if we don't do that, it's all going to go to Panama, which is another surprise. I went to Panama 15 years ago, after they got hold of the canal, and we look at the big freighters. Oh, the big freighters are coming through, and we have to be able to dredge the approaches to Savannah and dredge the approaches to Fort Lauderdale. That's not the issue. Of course, we're going to more or less dredge the approaches. The problem is that they're getting billions in taxes, billions and billions and billions in taxes, and we only used to pay 2 or 3 million for the ownership, for the right to use the canal. Billions in taxes, they can subsidize anything. And in Miami, where we have the famous banking industry, the center of banking for Latin America, it's just being sucked down into Panama. Panama is gunning for Miami, just explicitly. And by the way, if you read the New York Times, there was a huge article on Panama, and with the photographs, what they have done in 15 years completely outperforms Miami. And one of the things that you can look at, it used to be that you had to fly into Miami. To fly into Miami to visit Latin America. If you were in Colombia and you wanted to get to Panama City, you have to fly to Miami and hub through Miami. Look at the airline diagram. It all goes to Panama City now. We have 2 poles. They're explicitly gunning for us. I went to Detroit. Okay. And we've all heard about Detroit, and we're going to participate in the revitalization of Detroit. The problem was, in that case, bad government. It's not that the auto industry got driven out. The auto industry is absolutely operating outside of Detroit. It's just bad government, unfriendly to business government. But what's amazing is not that. We knew that. What's amazing is to see the ruins of a great civilization. Detroit was an absolutely magnificent city, extremely well planned from the beginning, updated with every new planning idea. Every new planning idea. You know, the best highways, highest quality, whatever came up, whatever silver bullet came up, they built it. But you cannot sustain bad government. Now, I'm about to go, within the same month, I'm going to go to London, and I know what I'm going to find because I go to London periodically. I remember when London was dingy and polluted, and no one wanted to live there, and London now is incredibly sleek, just sleek, curated, perfect parks, perfect transit, just fantastic, highest real estate value. People want to live there. And by the way, the weather is absolutely miserable, absolutely miserable, and it's dense, and you get a little bit of an apartment for astronomical monies, but it's excellent government. Like for 35 years, it's been excellent government. The ability to go after a vision and clean it up and clean it up and clean it up until it is so sleek it virtually shines, as opposed to Detroit. Talent. What we wanted to do was capture the talent of the 60,000 students that graduated every year from the proximity of High Point. We wanted to keep them. Any person, any business that starts in the proximity of London can attract any talent they want. It's a recruiting machine, absolute recruiting machine. I run a business in Miami. My wife, Elizabeth, has been for 15 years the dean at the University of Miami. We're uphill recruiting. You know, there are very few places that people want to live because of traffic congestion and sheer visual mediocrity. You know, Liz is now recruiting one more professor. We have to control what they see, trick them into it. Take them to Miami Beach, take them to downtown, or they'll take a position in Austin or someplace else, okay? And that's entirely different, very, very different. And one more thing, I arrived here early, and I went off to find Starbucks. And I was amazed at US 1. US 1 is so late model. Every shopping center is late model, the best little stores, beautiful landscaping, you know, your DOT, your public works, you know, managing, cleansing the water, you know, everything. US 1. Have you seen US 1, the US 1 that was built 30 years ago in Massachusetts? Have you seen what it's like? You want to kill yourself. You want to kill yourself. It's so miserable, so out of date, so congested, so dirty. The same US 1. Put on your 30-year glasses, put on your 20 years glasses. That which you've built there that's so sleek now is going to be a slum. It always ends up being a slum. There's nothing that you can do. There's not any more landscaping that you can do. That's a slum. Now, presently, we are going to enjoy it and love it, but that's not our job, okay? 750, it's not our job to see how beautiful your US 1 is. 750, the people in charge of 750, is to remind you of how it ends. Okay, how it ends when it falls out of date. How it ends when you allow a new generation of shopping centers to be built that absolutely undermines it the way that US 1 undermined Stewart, or would have if there hadn't been a very radical defense of downtown Stewart. It always ends this way. There are 3,000 shopping malls empty in the United States. Okay? And we know that already. Just because yours is great, and just because you're about to permit one more and you know the taxes, you have to know how it ends. You know? And that's the 750 plan. And if we sound strange and if we sound tough, it's because this is our job. And it's very important to know that we need to be grown up about this. Okay? So I've given you several anecdotes like this, so you allow us to sound different. Because we're not looking at it from the inside, and we're not looking at it from now. It is you who know what the inside is. You know every day, every day, every day. You know what the present is, you know what the local is. Permit us to look at this place, at this region, from the outside and from the great distance of time. That's what we need to be allowed to do. If we can focus on that, if we can focus and not be distracted with present concerns, but allow us to project it, I think we stand a fantastic chance of being a contender in the 21st century. Just a fantastic chance. And one of the reasons is the Everglades. But not the Everglades the way that one thinks of the Everglades. Oh, the Everglades, we're damaging the Everglades, you know, the 40 horses and 10 acres, you know, all that. By the way, you bug those horses, they're going to be in Alabama. Just want you to know. You put one more rule there about one more retention pond and one more detention pond and one more inspection and one more testing and one more test tube guy, those horses are going to be in Alabama. By the way, you don't know this, but Alabama is more beautiful than Florida. More beautiful. Alabama is gloriously beautiful. What we have here is a climate and some pretty interesting stuff that happened in the 1950s and 60s, including the airlines. But Alabama is beautiful. It's not torture to go there. And it doesn't take very much to say I've had it up to here. And that's what's happening. And there are places in Alabama and in Mississippi which, you know, you might say, oh, Alabama, Mississippi. Look, see what they've done. They've woken up. They're working. North Carolina is gunning for us. North Carolina is infinitely better located for distribution than Florida. Florida is lousy for distribution, lousy. It doesn't take much longer. Once you're in a ship, it doesn't take much longer to offload in Savannah. And if you see the arc of distribution, trucking, what it takes to distribute, it's a magnificent location. If you see the arc of Florida, it's nowhere. Okay? In a 500-mile drive in Florida, you get nowhere. Little Orlando, you know, that's about it. The arc that you pick up out of Chicago, the arc that you pick up out of LA, the arc that you pick out of the north is much more powerful. So we have a combination of good and bad things. Now, what are the good things? The Everglades is fantastic. Do you know why? Because it's disciplined us. We have a completely linear city, okay, between the barrier islands and the coast and the Everglades. We've developed a series of towns that are like a ladder. US 1, and developed along that with the structure of that vintage, that generation, the old towns that we're so interested in now. There's I-95 and the development that took place along that, and there's a turnpike. You could not invent a better, more efficient system for transportation. We have a linear city along the east coast of Florida. Anybody who does any kind of transportation analysis, you know, that says we need to get from here to there on rail, we need to get to here on bus rapid transit. You see, every other region in the United States is centroidal. It's like this, okay? It's a circle like that. The transportation's a mess. You need 10 lines to solve it. Poor Charlotte has to go up and over and east and west just to pick up. All we need is one line up and down and buses running this way, like that, and the entire region is wired. And you can continue living differently. If the Dade County people want to become an extension of Latin America, if you would like to become an extension of Virginia up here, fine, but it'd be nice to have both. It would be nice to be able to get very quickly to the colleges, to the hospitals, to the airports. It should be very, very easy to choose an airline and fly out of Fort Lauderdale or Palm Beach or Miami because the transit works. Our spectacular advantage is our geography, and it's because it has disciplined us in the past, and I have that. So we must emphasize that. I think we need to de-emphasize, or at least realize that we're working uphill with the ports because the distribution system is simply lousy. We're a peninsula. We also have to see that if you look at the radii that I'm going to show you, and I know that you people who are up here are looking north, you know, the people in these counties, it's really all about the Caribbean basin. It's the Caribbean basin. It's this little arc of yours, this enormous geography that you see, and you say, I am so far from Miami, thank the Lord, okay? If you look at any map of the world, that area of ours is a little fingernail sliver. And it's actually operating, the only reach we have is actually the Caribbean. Okay, now I know I'm from Dade County and I sound prejudiced, but there's nothing else to hook onto. There's nothing else, because everything else we hook onto is intercepted. Okay, Atlanta is intercepting us. Okay, Alabama's intercepting us. We have to look south, and this is going to be a shock, because there's a tendency here to want to secede from all those different people down there. But you cannot secede from being in Southeast Florida and looking at the map and seeing that the entire future is that. It's as if Texas saying, well, you know, we've had it with Mexico. We'll just look north to Oklahoma. You know, it's absolutely deadly. There's nothing to be done in Oklahoma. The energy's to the south. 50 years from now, it would be, it is, well, I mean, unless you want to become a kind of rustic version of Detroit. Now, one other thing about the scary stuff. A lot of the statistics about climate change, I want to de-emphasize climate change, okay? And the reason is that climate change, there's about 2,000 organizations working full-time on it. There's very, very little that we can add in terms of research and, you know, tactics and strategies and so forth. We need to see the effect, and by the way, even the scariest stuff is way out in the future. Okay? If you look at our lifetime, the worst of the worst, you can handle with galoshes. Okay, I'm not kidding. You know, Liz comes and tells me, she's on the committee, and she says, Liz, just remind me, do I misunderstand this? And it's like 2 inches. And I said, Liz, this is 2 inches. You know, our tires are waterproof. I do puddles all the time. You know, we can actually, oh, we're going to run out of water. I'm sorry. But we can just put a pipe up along I-95 to Okeechobee. And now I know that environmentally that pipe is going to be difficult to do. Yeah, that pipe is going to be difficult to do until we run out of water. And then people say the real estate is, because, you know, we're dumping a huge amount of water from Okeechobee, fresh water, into the sea. So I said, Liz, what's the problem with the hydrology? Why can't, he says, we're salinating our wells. Our wells are all going to be brackish. The percentage of water already being filtered, it's just incremental. Just a little more filters, a little more filters. I spoke. I said, what's the worst news? Well, we just keep putting more filters in. I don't think that 750 is going to be activated by climate change. That's further out, and there's a lot of technology, low-grade technology, that's going to do it. The trouble with climate change is when you get spooked. Okay? And what is spooking? Spooking is when Katrina hit. Okay, when Katrina hit, we had 5 developments on the Panhandle. 5 developments. Katrina hit, and the insurance companies got spooked. And it went from a spectacular business performance building these 5 developments, which were never hit. And by the way, when they've been hit, nothing happened to them before. But Katrina spooked the insurance companies, and the insurance companies hesitated for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it means we couldn't get the mortgages, and it drove a lot of people out of business, including St. Joe, Arvida. Okay? What we have to worry about is spooking, in case spooking people into thinking this is not a good investment. This is going to be a problem. And I don't want 750 to be based on spooking people. Because if the conclusion of 750 is that anybody who has a long-range plan should just move directly up to Georgia or directly up to Orlando, that would be completely counterproductive. Okay? So I would say that the presentation of 750 should be driven by something other than climate change. And I know my own team is absolutely enamored of the problem of climate change. They can't get enough of it. And that is completely counterproductive. First of all, if you look at the stats, it ain't happening fast enough to even be within the 50-year range. You know, this is more 21st century stuff. It's nothing we can't handle. Nothing we can't handle. By the way, and what's the worst? We had a session that I insisted on called The Black Swan. I don't know whether you've heard about The Black Swan. The Black Swan is a book. Black swans happen unexpectedly. It is by definition something that you didn't expect. And I said, could we have a session on just the black swans? Because the minute you actually predict the black swan, then it becomes a white swan, and you can deal with it. So I got together 5 or 6 people, including newspaper people and so forth, and said, what's the worst thing that can happen? So let me just give you one instance of what I thought would be the most interesting. The most interesting thing that I thought would happen is that somewhere there is a meltdown of an atomic power plant. It's happened twice, Chernobyl and the Japanese one. And the Germans got spooked. And, you know, the elected officials said, we're going to shut the atomic power plant. Now, of course, they're sorry they said that, and they're retreating from it. We're going to shut down nuclear in Germany in 7 years. So I thought, well, we better deal with this, because we have a lot of nuclear plants. All we have to do have is a semi-accident like 3 Mile Island, and the feds, under political pressure, will say you've got 10 years to shut down your nuclear generation in Florida. So we spoke to people about what that would be like. Well, turns out, and what I wanted to hear was essentially that no problem, we have enough wind and tidal, you know, that we can replace it. As long as we have 10 years with wind and tidal. Well, it turns out that our Florida Power and Light is the world's #1 owner and operator of wind power. Already. It's in Texas. They own the Texas fields. So we said, well, if we get spooked, can we go into wind? And they said, yeah, we can. And I said, well, how much of Biscayne Bay is it going to take? Because at this point, you can't do it on dry land, right? It's going to be either the Everglades or Biscayne Bay. But at that point, I do believe that the nuclear situation can actually be dealt with. Every single thing we could come up with, the dryness, the tidal, etc., we have enough time to deal with it. By the way, this is different from it not happening. I'm not saying it isn't going to happen. I'm not saying that, you know, the sea level isn't going to go up. I'm not saying it isn't going to get warmer. I'm not saying it isn't. We can handle it. Okay, so I would really like this report to say we looked at everything, we looked at the worst they could send us, and we can handle it. Yes, it's going to be a problem. Yes, we need to spend time on it, but we can handle it. What we can't handle is economic competition. We cannot handle economic competition. The ruthlessness of the other people who are gunning for us is amazing, and we have created unbelievable disadvantages, not least of which is a permitting environment, an ability to get things done, which is essentially making it impossible. Now, people like me, I can get a permit. Hell, I make a living getting permits. You know, lots of the grown-ups do, but the kids can't. The millennials can't. They don't know how. You know, it's much, much worse now than when we were 20 years old. So, what can we do? Of all the things that we're proposing here, there's 2 that I very much like. One is to turn the ladder, this incredible geographic discipline that we have from Orlando on down, into a absolutely first-rate transportation system so that our ports work together, our airports work together, our hospitals work together, our colleges work together, so that the mega region is the most efficient of all the mega regions. The second thing is, you have the advantage, this scary old Dade County down there that speaks Spanish, best thing that ever happened to Southeast Florida. Because it's our area. That's the only area in the 3-hour flight circle. That's the only area that we dominate. Okay? All of you can secede all you want to Orlando, which seems friendlier. but they haven't got anything going in Orlando except possibly good government. Okay, they do have good government. It's not particularly well located. It doesn't have ports. It has a terrific ability thanks to Disney. By the way, when I say good government in Orlando, it's Disney. That's the good government. It's private government. And so they get the airport. They took that place. They market properly. They keep it clean. They keep it well run. They keep it neat looking. Okay? That's, in some ways, that's too late for us. We're much more democratic down here than Orlando is. Orlando is a big corporate, actually quasi-fascist operation. And fascism, you can say what you like, but it's efficient. And that's what they're running there. We don't have that. We have a bunch of squabbling towns all the way down, but we can tie them together like nothing. And we have a market that we dominate. That circle of a 3-hour flight is absolutely fantastic. By the way, the 3-hour drive gets you nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. Where are you going to go? Naples for dinner? We have a lousy, we are a sea power. Okay, that's what we are. We're a sea power and an air power. We're not a land power. And we have to tie this together so we can compete with Panama City and really the emergence of Colombia, the emergence of some of the cities. The cities in Mexico that are becoming more Texan, like León, you know what they feel like? They feel like Boston. If you've been to León, it feels like Boston. You know, the colleges are great, everybody speaks English, you know, because of Texas. So that's what we need to do. We do have advantages, we don't want to lose them. Now, one last thing about the Stewart plan, which I think is the most interesting. It was the first public charrette. Dan Carey said we had to do it, and we had to do it that way. But here's a part that's never retold. We worked 7 days, right here on site. I presented at 4 o'clock one day with the city council. We took time for dinner, and the entire plan was passed officially and implemented by 8 o'clock. 4 hours between presentation and implementation. 4 hours. Okay? Imagine that. The second thing, by the way, is the second time we did this is after Katrina, the mayor of Lake Charles. We had all the legislation set. I presented in the same session the plan was passed. And the bulk of the money went to Lake Charles because the rest of the people couldn't get their act together. So Lake Charles, Louisiana is working on all cylinders. Now, you may not like what's happening because virtually the only industry is churches and casinos. You might think, well, you know, what was the good of that? But at least they got their tax base, they didn't go bankrupt. That was passed in the same hearing. And the recent charrette that I finished, in fact, yesterday, actually, the city manager is essentially committed to getting the code and voting on it in a week. To which we ask, why wait? He understood perfectly. You know, I think that the sense of time, the fact that it takes 3 years to get a permit to do anything in Florida, okay, do you realize that's the Second World War? The United States was in the Second World War for 3.5 years, and they built 280,000 airplanes, and all we're asking for here is a piece of paper with a stamp on it for 3.5 years. And by the way, when I was asked once, Mr. Duany, and how long do you think it should take to get the permit for anything in Florida, the maximum amount? And I pulled out my calendar and I did some dates and I said, 11 months and 9 days. I said, well, why do you say that? He says, because that's D-Day to the fall of Berlin. Okay, like we conquered Europe in 11 months. Do you think I could get a piece of paper here? You know, in 11 months, do you think I could get a piece of paper? I am not talking about suspending standards. I'm talking about a sense of urgency and a sense of mission and so forth. You know, yes, we're going to need that rail. There's no way we're going to need we can avoid the transportation. There is no way that we're going to avoid building the compact cities that the 21st century needs. There is no way we can dodge the bullet that the cars are going out, that the automobile dependency is going out. We can't dodge it in the long run. Yeah, we can dodge it in the short run. Of course, I love cars, and we're selling more trucks than ever. That's not our job. We can't dodge it. And what I would urge you to do is that whatever we do here, and partially it's due to us, whatever we do here, that it be done fast, that we have a sense of urgency. I used to think that the meltdown of 2007 would be helpful in terms of the sense of urgency. The exact opposite happened, to my great disappointment. You know, there is very little sense of urgency. You know, we don't need to have more public meetings like this. We should just finish the thing, and you should pass it. Okay, that's what should happen. Okay, you should just trust us and pass it, and let's go, because you know what? Very little is going to change in terms of the plan. I want to show you. Now, it is our job. It is our job to give you some comfort and trust as to what we're saying. Okay, here's 750. 7 counties, 50 years. It's not about the present. It's a look ahead of trends and opportunities. Yes, trends and opportunities, very politically correct. But what? What about concerned and missed opportunities? What happens if Panama Steel eats our lunch? What happens if Houston and Dallas eats our lunch? They too are Caribbean powers. It's a big region. 50 years is a very long time. Most humans don't think about that. By the way, the present is a distortion field. That beautiful US 1 here, completely beautiful and enjoyable, well run, nice looking parking lots, distortion field. Okay? Just look at the Massachusetts US 1 and see how it ends. The key that woke me up to this was Victor Dover's early presentation, in which he showed images of Florida 50 years ago, what it was like in 1962. Very interesting. 50 years is a long time. This is from now today, that was from his presentation. Today, we will discuss ideas, which is what I've been doing, not data. I don't have a single data, except the fact that 4 hours later, Stewart passed the code. Okay? The 750 plan is different from what the local government does. Whatever you were doing here today, before I spoke, that's different. Okay, whatever you do when you go back, you know, to the places that you're caring for, that you ran to be elected officials, that you're administering, that's different. That's not our job. It's not about the next election. It's not a local issue at all. It's not at all about that. It's not just about the way we see ourselves. Oh, we see ourselves as this, we see ourselves as that, we like it, we like ourselves. Forget about it. It's how others see us. It's from the outside. Okay? If an international company like Airbus is thinking of coming here, okay, and Alabama and Panama City are available, and Leon has an English-speaking working force, it's not about how we see ourselves. How does Airbus see us? How does Airbus see us? Well, nice place to retire, but try to get a permit here, and you'll see what I mean. That's, by the way, it's another reason that Boeing went to Charleston. We're not the worst. We are not remotely like California. We're not remotely like the Virginia area in terms of getting permits. We're not the worst, but we're not North Carolina, and we're not Alabama, and we're not Texas, and we should be. In a competitive world, the ruthlessness is amazing. These people are hungry. 750, the world. Sorry, I'm sorry, I edited some stuff out. Okay, it looks very different. Do you know what Latin America looks like? Look, what North America looks like from Latin America? It's completely upside down. Their world is centered elsewhere. We are competitive in a certain world, not the whole world. Okay, now one of the things that I learned is that there's an obsession with China. Oh, the Chinese, you know, the things are coming and so forth. You know, I'm sorry, they've already, the Northeast, the Northwest has eaten our lunch. They're full of Chinese, Chinese-speaking people. The Canadians have an immigration policy that is bringing the wealth and the youth and the talent of China to the Northwest. That's where they go, with a little bit on LA. But we do have the Caribbean. The Caribbean, there's a beautiful statement that I heard. I read a book that said, the Caribbean and the Mediterranean are a single discontinuous sea. They're like this, and it was actually the same people came over. anytime we want to connect with not only Spain and Italy, but Greece and Israel and North Africa, we make more sense than anywhere else in the United States. Okay? The North European migration, not. Okay? New England makes so much more sense. Washington makes so much more sense. Okay? We're not, they are going to go elsewhere. It doesn't, other than retirement in Orlando, it doesn't make much sense. But you know what? We did a late catch. Because of the climate, of the weather, and generally benevolent, pretty well-run places, we caught the North Europeans coming down all the way to the Midwest. You know, and now we have an extraordinary axis from Boston to Chicago and Toronto and so forth that comes in. We need to support that. We did catch the North European market, but actually through North America. Then we have the African migration. It's fantastic. You know, Brazil is working with 50% African energy. Cuba is going to work with 50% African energy. Now, I want to actually bring up Cuba. I've been to Cuba a few times. Cuba is 11 million people, as more than Florida. Cuba is as large as Florida. Cuba has a very high education level. Everybody's literate in Cuba. And Cuba is starving. Okay? They don't have a nickel. Do you know what we have south of us? We have a China. We have a China to the south of us. Unbelievable. People educated, starving to work, speaking Spanish, and we have Miami, which is the Twin City. Okay? Miami and Havana are like New York and Tel Aviv. You know, they're twin cities, they're transparent. Within 50 years, do you think Cuba is going to open up? It's going to open up within 5 years. And what's that going to do? Is it going to be a complete drain? Are we going to see? Why would you start a business in South Florida when you could get at least as good a climate in Cuba with a fraction of the cost? Why would you open a resort when you have 250 miles of intact beaches in Cuba, you know, facing north? Why would anybody look at Southeast Florida when Cuba opens up? It's 11 million people. You know what gets you when you go to Cuba? Is not the decrepitude. It's the energy of the people and the size. The size is amazing. It's not a Caribbean island. It's a whole Florida floating out there. It's that big. And I think that's the biggest black swan of all. I would say that this region, if you would like to secede to Orlando, fine. You'll become progressively rustic. But if you can tie it up, if everything that you do here, maintaining your quality of life, if you connect to the Spanish-speaking part and you become associated with that because of excellent, transparent transportation, and you tap into Cuba, I can guarantee a great 21st century. The Latin American migration, yes. Quality of life. They love us because of quality of life. Of course you can make money in Brazil much faster. Of course you can get permits. But have you walked down a street in Rio? Because on the other end, first of all, you can't get to a meeting because of the traffic congestion. Second of all, it's totally unsafe. All over Latin America, the quality of life is very low. We have a beautiful quality of life here. Beautiful. Do you know what it feels like when you go to Latin America and you arrive at messy Miami airport? You know, you say, ooh, messy. It smells of Cuban food here. There are huge crowds. What are they doing? Packing suitcases in plastic. Weird. Okay, that's if you come from Wisconsin. If you come from South America and you arrive in Miami, you think you've arrived in Geneva. It's Zurich. It's the cleanest, best run place they've ever seen. See, the relative advantage of the United States, even at its worst, is that the quality of life is high. We cannot afford to lose that quality of life by messing it up, allowing it to become ugly, and traffic congestion. Because then they might as well stay in Brazil. Or they'll fly somewhere else where it's a better run. But Latin America is fantastic. We really tapped into that. Asian migration, I hear about it all the time, not. You only think that an Asian is going to come here if you haven't been to the Northwest. That's where the kids are. That's where the youth of Asia is, and it's too far. Okay? 4 out of 6 ain't bad. It could be one of the best places in America in terms of connection. Look at that. Look at all from the north, from the south, from the east, from the southwest. Got to tap into that. Unbelievable energy. Oh, but only if we compete as a region. We are too small. We're under the radar screen if we don't do it. By the way, these are the emerging mega regions. Huge mega regions. The Northwest. This is the what I would call the LA, San Diego, Mexican outfit. The Texas one here. Unbelievable. Where's the Texas? Here. Incredibly powerful. These guys are working on all cylinders. This is a kind of oil belt. The Northwest, don't be distracted by Chicago. They're working. This is extraordinary here. The old South is going in all cylinders. The Mississippi coast is completely awoken. And then there's us. These are the mega regions. You know, these mega regions, any one of these can throw an election in Washington, any one of them. When you can throw an election, they'll pick up your phone at the State Department. And if you don't like what they're about to do to your tomato crop, you call up, you say, I'm calling from the 750 mega region, and we don't like that deal with Colombia, and they'll listen, but they don't listen otherwise. I don't care whether you say, but it's 50 tomato growers. It's all 50 tomato growers. That doesn't work anymore, and it certainly will not work in the future. Okay, the 20 seaports by cargo, mostly they're in Asia. Okay, you know what the advantage we have of the seaport? None of our seaports are in the top 20. Okay, but if you look at the airports, the top 20 airports, there are only 3 seaports that are highly coordinated with airports, you know, which you can actually transship. And that's Miami, of course, Miami and Port Everglades are perfect. Even Texas had a tremendous disadvantage. So this air-sea stuff is extremely important, particularly because, you know, just another little anecdote. I tell you anecdotes because remember, I was flying US Air. Maybe it was US Air, maybe it was another one. And I was really hungry because of the humiliation of flying. And I said, do you have peanuts? And they said, well, we don't serve anymore. And I said, well, why not? Well, because a bag of peanuts costs 12 cents. And I said, yeah. Can't you afford that? And they said, yes, but we fly 300,000 passengers a day or something. Multiply 6 cents by 300,000, and we can't afford to give you peanuts. Now, do you think that with the way the fuel prices are going, that the airlines are going to stay in business, and that it's going to be anything but an elite operation within 50 years? They're gone. This normal, I'm going over to see my cousin, you know, I'm going over for Thanksgiving. In 50 years, that's gone. It's going to be very elite. But you know what's going to come back? Seaborne transportation, which is the best layout for seaborne transportation virtually in the world. Southeast Florida. That intracoastal, you know, we can have transportation, and it's extremely inexpensive seacoast transportation. And by the way, we should stop gentrifying our seacoast, because it's going to have to go back to industrial. This idea that every brownfield site on the coast, that every port is going to become something else, that it's just going to be condos, don't do that. Because industry is going to want to be on the water in 50 years. There's no way the airlines are going to be operating the way they are now, that you can actually ship, you know, umbrellas from China. The major U.S. airports, okay, very important, the major U.S. airports, all of them except L.A. reach Florida within a 3-hour flight. All the airports, all the major airports, the only one that doesn't is L.A., but all of them reach. It's the hub. It's the American hub. And then look at this. Of all the airports that are competing with us, which is to say the Texas ones and the Panama City, the only one that covers the Caribbean is Miami and Fort Lauderdale. We own the Caribbean. We're the Rome of the Caribbean. And it's just geography. 3-hour flight. It's a fantastically privileged operation. And this is where we can beat Panama City, because they don't reach enough American places. Panama City and Texas. You know, the Dallas, Houston, They're not good enough contenders. We are the contenders. We can be the Rome of the Caribbean, or we can throw it away. And then you have, anyway, here we are. I wanted to show you this. As a land power, zero. Look at Savannah, look at North Carolina, look at Los Angeles, look at Houston. Southeast Florida has no hinterland. What gets delivered here has a very long haul and a very small market compared to the middle of the East Coast and compared to LA. Florida cannot be about itself because we don't have a hinterland. We are extremely disadvantaged being in the tip of a peninsula that can't reach anything. I mean, yes, you can offload furniture for Orlando, but that's it. But the Caribbean is there. So here we have, within 1 day's drive, look at Texas. Look at this is 1 day's drive from Texas. Look at 1 day's drive from Savannah, and the absolutely pathetic 1 day's drive from Miami. You know, from Southeast Florida, you get nowhere. The principal concerns, huge amount of bureaucracy. I couldn't understand what was going on here. I had to go through this exercise. These are all the main agencies that we're working with 750. So what I did is I took their mission statements, all their mission statements, so that we could arrive at our mission statement. I didn't know what their mission statement was, so we took the top three, which is this, EPA, HUD, DOT. They got together. The three of them got together. These are the people who paid for principally for our work here, and these are the livability principles. We basically put them in a standard format of grammar, and we found that the only one we need to add was this one, to enhance the resiliency to climate change. That's the only thing that did not happen. And so we adjusted it. And then we took the next one, which is the State Chamber of Commerce, and we put it, that's what they did. We rewrote it using the same grammatical structure, and then we added it. We combined all that. And then we took and then we adjusted it. By the way, when I say adjust, we adjust it to the input from you. The adjustment is always the result of 750. So you have the principles, and then we adjust it to 750. And then we took the 750 work groups, you know, the notes that we took, put them in a box, put them all together, everything combined, cleaned them up, and this is what you get. Okay, this was an act of intellectual, it was extremely hard to do, to put all this together. But essentially, it was hard to do, but only because of the grammatical construction. In fact, we're all after the same thing. We're all after the same thing. So it wasn't really that hard. But let me now talk about the great event that actually pulled me in. The famous secession of the northern counties. The threat of secession. Don't plan us. We don't like what you're doing. You know, we don't want one more layer of government. We don't want, you know, more bureaucracy, etc. I completely sympathize, as you can tell. Of course you don't want one more layer of government. Of course you're right about this, okay? But we are not necessarily doing this, and particularly what Marcela spoke about was because the theory of subsidiarity. Now, subsidiarity is the theory that decisions should be made at the smallest, most local level at the latest moment, okay? Top-down government brings it all up to the top and says the federal government has to make. We trust the federal government to make all the decisions. Okay? And then there's bottom-up government in which everybody gets to come up and talk forever about anything and nothing can be voted. And the elected officials have to run continual campaigns, and they can't make a decision even about how to locate a school. Okay? So top-down, bottom-up are both a problem. Subsidiarity says we design who makes what decision and when. And the principle is the smallest party that can competently make it, the most local and the latest. Let's decide as little as possible now and download to others later that which actually, because they'll be more competent to do it. So this is what we did. Okay, I took all the issues here. These are all the issues that we spoke about with subsets, like this. Okay, so this is everything that you all brought up in all the charrette. Okay, put in order. And then on top, there is the person. This column is the individual. This column is, I'm going to go down. The individual, the household, the block, the institution, like the church or the school board would be the institution, the corporation, the neighborhood, the city, the county, the metropolitan planning organization, 750, and then Florida, the United States, and the United Nations. Okay, all the way up. By the way, I said the earth. And people said, say the United Nations, confront that it's the United Nations. Well, the United Nations has very little to say about most things, okay? Right? And there are a lot of things that can actually be decided locally. I think that this process got spooked because when you all brought up local issues, we wrote them down. So we said the bushes and the this and the maintenance, and we just wrote and wrote and gave the wrong impression that 750 was going to affect everything that you brought up. And it's not. It's going to affect just that which is relevant, and it is a level which is between the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is like Treasure Coast, and the state of Florida. Now, if you think this is unnecessary, you don't know how dysfunctional the three metropolitan planning organizations are relative to each other. They're just not talking to each other. They have different theories. Treasure Coast and the Dade County bunch and the Monroe bunch, they're different. And they're not working on all cylinders. So we need to coordinate them. And this brings up an issue. You notice that some issues over here actually are affected by 750, and then one level up of government, or 2 levels down, or 3 levels down, or 1 level down and 2 up, okay? What we're proposing, and this is a summary, okay? These are the ones that we affect. This is the 750 mega region here, and these are the issues that come up for discussion, and it's either 4 levels down or 1 up, etc. What 750 will do is convene these people, just convene. It will not decide. It'll say, this is an issue that needs to be discussed. It will convene the 3 levels of government and have them talk to each other. The decision still takes place wherever it's taking place, but it has the power to say, let's talk, so that we can coordinate the ports, we can coordinate the airports, we can coordinate the agricultural policy, etc. So this does not have the ability to decide, it has the ability to convene. Existing levels of government decide, 750 has the ability to convene. Okay? These are the issues. These are the issues, and the report is going to consist of this heading. Okay, so this is the issue here, this is 750, and it will convene these 3 levels of government, and the report will look like this. Okay, it will consist of an observation, it will consist of a discussion, and it will consist of recommendation. Observation, discussion, recommendation. So the 3 levels or 4 levels of government will be convened and say, deal with this. We have the statistics, something needs to be done or not done, but it just organizes it. So it'll be an extremely organized report. And by the way, all the expensive to acquire statistics and all that stuff will be background information. This is going to be the dashboard. This is the dashboard. Everything that happens behind, you know, the Rube Goldberg system, that stays in place. Something about the American planning tradition, because I think it's an incredible mistake of the Tea Party and Agenda 21 and all that to think that Americans don't plan, okay? That is ahistorical, okay? This country is great because it is planned. Now, planning is different from bureaucracy, but I want to completely kill the misinformation that planning is alien to America. The American planning tradition, Washington, D.C. The first act of Congress was to commission and approve the plan of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a regional plan. It's an enormous city. And this is what it looked like. Okay? America was an empty continent. It consisted of teepees, bogs, mosquitoes, sod buildings, logs. And yet our founding fathers, the people who came up with the Constitution, the very same people, Washington and Jefferson and the like, actually planned Washington, D.C. And we revere the Constitution, we should revere them as planners, because they saw a vision to build in this Potomac a capital of a scale that 200 years later still works. And talk about vision. You know, if I had been commissioned to do something in 1790, I would have designed Georgetown. You know, just a little old Georgetown. And said, oh, that's more than enough. You should be grateful to have Georgetown. But they conceived of a capital city. It was total vision, 200 years ahead and still working. We're only asked to do 50 years. We're pikers compared to these guys. Okay? And they started. And they just laid out the avenues before anything was there. And they started with first-generation buildings. But every building contributed. Suddenly, it wasn't random. Okay, you can only build a little brick townhouse, but it's going to be along this street. And yes, it's not paved yet, but when it happens, we'll be able to pave it, and it'll all be aligned, and it will all end, you know, on the Capitol, and we'll know where the parks are, and so forth. So look at that, 1839. Already that avenue that preceded the Capitol lined up on the Capitol. All the avenues, 6, 7, 8 avenues, which were just empty fields. But orderly planning gives you, eventually ended up in this completely sensible city that we see. Washington, D.C., 1852. Look at the mall, already reserved. The mall is still a swamp, still a malarial swamp. Right? Look at the avenues coming in like that. Just clicking together, and of course this is what you see now. 250 years later, an amazing performance by our founding fathers of regional and detailed planning. And by the way, the code was written by Jefferson. And the code, by the way, was 3 sentences, the building code. And if I could quote it, I have to find the code because it's so elegant. I would just mangle it, so I won't tell you. But it's a beautiful code that gave rise to this. Now I want to show you this. This is Washington, D.C. This is the plan of 1791. And it was just to show you how exactly it was built. Just take this portion here. There it is. Look at that portion. White House, everything laid out. And here it is exactly now. Okay, all they did, 1791 to 1967, all they did was add the trees. Not only was it planning, it was really precise planning. This was not, and you know, I have a picture somewhere. May I remind you, this was not Lenin and Stalin. It was Washington and Jefferson. Okay, you cannot say anymore that Americans don't plan. And I'm going to say one other thing. Look at this. Do you know what that is? That is the ownership pattern of the area of Washington, D.C. Each of the little dark lines was a different, separate holding. And these are the avenues overlaid. Well, if the property could have been unaffected, Washington would have been a complete hodgepodge with no avenues connecting, no termination, who gets the capital. But what they did is they said everyone throws in, I don't know whether you can see it here, you can see the avenues and you can see the ownership, 27 separate ownerships. And they said everybody throw in the land, we will lay the Washington plan, you will get back 2/3 of the land, we will keep 1/3 for the roads, 1/3 for the government buildings, but your land will instantly be worth 3 times as much because there's planning. Because what there is, there's a vast empty continent that's unpredictable. You know, who knows what will happen? Lots of cheap land, just as it still is in America, but only the planned places have a future and have the high real estate value. So the first act of Congress was what you would call, okay, I hate to say this because I'm not of this side of the political spectrum, was a wholesale condemnation, probably the largest to have ever been done in America. The first act of Congress was a wholesale condemnation. to get a better plan going. Okay, so what I would like to do is to raise the level of discourse here. I don't mind what you think about government or what you think about this, whatever, but you cannot factually say, and it shouldn't stand, that planning is anti-American. Now, bureaucracy is anti-American, terribly anti-American, and we couldn't have colonized the continent without it, but planning is American. Washington, D.C., 1822, beautiful thing. Washington, D.C., okay, now, here's another thing. You may have noticed that we colonized a continent virtually without a banking system in 50 years. That we went from east to west after the Civil War, creating wealth and wealth and wealth and wealth with very little government to help or to hinder. This is a result of the, see this? This is the Jeffersonian grid that was laid out right across the continent. And it is only because Jefferson laid out the Jeffersonian grid that you were able to own things, that you were able to say where you were and that my farm was mine and that you were able to develop it and to own it. And if you look at Florida, if you look at the roads here, all the roads that we're working on now, all these roads, the fact that things make sense in Florida, that was Jefferson mega planning an entire continent 250 years ago. So how can you say that if 750 proposes that we want the rail lines to hook up, that we want the densification where the buses are going to stop in the future, that you want the ports to actually connect to the airports, how can you intrinsically, ideologically say that planning isn't American when everything that you see was laid out by Thomas Jefferson in a national mega plan? So could we please just elevate the level of discourse to the facts? Okay? And there's plenty to argue about, but this isn't one of the things. The beautiful ladder that I spoke about, which was disciplined by the coast and the Everglades and the first generation, absolutely sensible. Ferries, when ferries first came, the first road, and then the ferries went to the islands, and then I-95, and then Route 1, well, that was Route 1, this was Route 1, and then I-95 was built, and the exits of I-95 were where the ferries were. Do you see the organic development? Where the ferries crossed, those were the main streets, and by the way, all on the Jeffersonian grid. This is still on the Jeffersonian grid of 150 years earlier, and then you built the turnpike, and you built the airports, and then you built well, that's the turnpike now, and then you stopped planning and it became a mess. Okay? What we're proposing is that there be a series of logical airports, hospitals, free zones, pink zones, you know, only the highest level of institution, and that they be connected by rail. I want to know who put this Indian River State College here in the middle of nowhere. Like, what the hell's going on? What does this do? What is this helping? How do they get here? Why isn't this in a future rail station? No, it's true. It's true. You know, this is in the middle of nowhere, and this is an incubator of talent and of everything, and it's just completely unplanned. It landed, I hesitate to ask what the criteria was. We cannot be making institutions of this quality. If this institution is going to be a great institution, it's got to connect to the region. Now, I'm not going to go quickly, but I want to say this. Do you remember this cat? This cat walked 200 miles. It was lost. It was lost in a camp. The family had to leave, and it found its family. And they asked, how can the cat have been so oriented, so well oriented? Because of the ladder. Okay? That ladder, this ladder here, which is what we're working on, and we want to reinforce this great asset, which is the ladder of transportation. Everything of this plan, as we continue to grow, will be slung on that. What we need is the cooperation so that in the future, when you install institutions like this, when you decide where the hospitals go, that it relate to the mega region and not just the convenience of the land ownership. And don't even dream for a moment that it isn't going to keep growing. Okay, because look at it, 1968, 2012. We're going to preserve the natural. We're going to evolve and improve. I don't want you to imagine that this is the climax condition of Florida. This cannot be the climax condition of Florida. We have to take this to this. And that's one of the things that, now not all of it, but some of it has to become first rate. Growth according to existing trends, and this is the cat that made it. Happy humans. Okay, now, tell me what I said that made no sense, please, in your questions and comments.
Andreas, thank you very much for that presentation. I'd like to just start with the council members. Is there a question or comment from a council member?
I just have one question for him. When you were talking about alternative energies and you addressed wind and turrets.
No?
Still have you back there? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where the solar component came in. Is it just not, is it too fragile? Why did that not come up as part of the alternative energy discussion that you had?
I was told that I would get all the questions first and then I could answer. That was how I was disciplined. So I'm writing it down. Okay.
Why don't we, okay, let's go through the council and see if there's any other comments or questions. Let Andreas get them, so we'll go here, and then, okay, no, and then Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I'd be willing to do it one by one, but, okay? Or I can write notes, whichever. Mr. Chairman, I don't know which.
Yeah, I think I've got a little time constraint because I have a couple of members that are leaving at 12, and we have a couple of action items. So if we could just go ahead and present the questions to Andreas, and then he could kind of sum them all up and make one quick answer to it.
Thank you, Andreas. We have issues along our tri-rail, and I'm from Lake Worth area, of course, and we have issues where people have difficulty on your ladder going across the rungs.
Yeah.
The rungs seem to be the problem.
Yeah.
How do we address that kind of lateral
You mean
movement,
the
east-west?
The east-west.
Right.
Got it.
Address
Okay.
that, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, and it's great information, and I did go to a couple of the charrettes, but I'm just curious as what exactly are we going to do with this plan? You know, is it something that the regional, the Treasure Coast is going to adopt? You know, are you going to be a separate entity and to yourself over the Treasure Coast? Because, you know, it's just a question as to what are you going to do with the plan once it's implemented.
Any other questions from the council? Yes.
Two questions. One is, can you give me an example of ruthless? You brought that up several times.
Ruthless capitalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how that's sort of being used. The other is, we see plans that end up on a shelf. How is this different?
Yeah.
Commissioner Solari?
I have a comment. The gentleman a number of times said or implied that the Tea Party doesn't like planning and that the people who are against this plan don't like planning. I know an awful lot of people who are against the 750, and not one of them has ever mentioned to me that they don't like planning. The idea that somebody has suggested that planning is anti-American is not something I have ever heard from anybody. The idea that we should not plan is not anything that I have ever heard from anybody. And I've spent a lot of time with the people who are against this, probably more than anybody in this room. And I have never heard that. I've never heard that planning is not valuable. And when you take one set of Americans, like Tea Party members, and say that they're somehow saying things like this, I find that extremely offensive. What many have said, and what
Folks, please.
many people have said, and what I've said a number of times, are that the deeply held values of the 750 Foundation document, which I've read many times, are inconsistent with the deeply held values of the majority of people in Indian River County. And that has never been discussed or explained away. I wrote a long letter to Mr. Busha, point by point, explaining which deeply held values that we held, which were different from the deeply held values of the 750 plan. And I can tell you that the deeply held values of the EPA, HUD, and U.S. Department of Transportation, the shock troops of the Obama administration, may be the deeply held values of the majority of people in this room. That I do not know. But they are not the deeply held values of the vast majority of citizens in Indian River County. And that is what we have said.
Okay.
Folks, please, please.
Okay.
This is trying to keep this orderly. Okay, any other questions from council members? Yes, sir.
Are we too late for the Caribbean? I recently visited St. Thomas, St. John, Nevis, and St. Kitts, and the Chinese have flooded that place already with money.
Okay, any others? All right, so Andreas, I got solar, the east-west connections,
Yep.
future leadership, the ruthlessness, competition, and too late.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do it backwards. Just, oh yeah, sorry. I'm not surprised about the Caribbean and the Chinese being there, but the ruthlessness that I mentioned is, I don't necessarily approve of it. I mean, disapprove of it. I don't disapprove of it. It's a fact. It's a fact. Remember, I just came from a place that was one of the glories of America, which was the High Point. And you have to know anything about interior design to see the craftsmanship of High Point. And when I know that since 2006, the Caribbean bought it and shut it. I mean, the Chinese bought it and shut it. They didn't even compete. That is the ruthlessness I'm talking about. I've also been to China. And my take on it is that the Chinese will, even if we sign the Kyoto Protocol, they're not going to pay the least attention to it. The least attention. Okay? We are competing in an absolutely ruthless world, and many of our competitors don't like us. They're not even neutral. They don't like us. And that's the fray. You can either recede into kind of, you can either circle the wagons, and say we're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 generations in which we can still be Americans and live, or you have to enter the fray. I would say that given the location that we have, we have the capability of entering the fray, that we can actually deal with the Chinese and we can deal with it. But if we want to hide, that is what democracy leads to. If you get the policies that you vote for. So, By the way, I'd like to now deal with the Tea Party, the deeply held values. Okay, all those deeply held values I happen to personally hold. Okay, and as far as I can tell, the EPA, the DOT, and the HUD have always been my enemies. Okay, in terms of how I like to operate. So I'm with you, and I completely understand, but they're not going to go away. All my life, I have dealt with them. I have dealt with them and dealt with them and dealt with them and dealt with them. And what we're trying to do, since they're not going to go away and they're ever more powerful, is we want to hijack them. The whole idea is to get those agencies which are immortal essentially, to do our bidding much better. And that's the attitude that I have, to change their values and not to ignore them. The idea that you actually secede from this plan instead of affecting those agencies is not the way to change the world. They'll crush you. So this is our chance to interact with those agencies and change their policies and change their deeply held values. That's what I think we should do. We should just lighten their hand, take their money if necessary, if they insist on thrusting it at us, if they insist, but lighten their hand and let us operate. That's the situation. And by the way, every anecdote you have, I could tell you 10. So there's nothing you're going to tell me about the oppression of those agencies. I know that. But we have to deal with them. I'm just a realist, just like I think we have to deal with the ruthless Chinese. That's the thing.
I'm not going to engage in a long conversation on this because I take up 2 hours of this meeting with you.
Yeah.
I'll just leave with, well, how well did that work out for Westchester County, New York? not at all. So
No, that's not true. Westchester County, New York is in full retreat. I mean, the HUD is in full retreat.
yeah, because when they first came to Westchester County, they spent $50 million rewriting all their codes, and it was only when they stood up to HUD.
Right.
Well, which is not.
Well,
what we're
that's-
doing. It's only when they stood up to HUD and sued them that they were able to make some argument.
Love it.
We are not going to change HUD, EPA, and U.S.
Yes, you are. We have to.
Well, we're not at this unless we stand up against them. Like
But you don't
Westchester
stand up by seceding.
County. No, you don't stand up. by-
You're circling the wagon and letting them trample all over you.
Well, again, we need a different. form.
Well, you know, I don't want this to be a six county code. That's easy. Okay, and that's not, and that's not,
I would
let's,
wish that you take Indian River County off, that the symbol of Indian River County off. the
Mr. Chairman, we're not going to settle this
Right,
here.
I
Let's
agree.
move
okay,
on,
I'm
please.
sorry we're not talking about this because this is the main issue.
Move on, please.
Well,
I think
it's the main issue.
The one point to the question on solar
Yes.
is pretty much like with our regional policy that we'll have later in the agenda. I think the overall 750 plan, and we're still writing this, just so you know, is that there would be a recommendation to increase the amount of solar available and then leave it to the local governments to decide, okay, how are we going to maybe go after that goal? Do we create our own solar field? Do we support some of these programs like the Solar Energy Loan Fund that former Commissioner
I'm gonna
Doug
talk.
Howard is heading up? Locally, you can make a decision to participate in that or not. But I think from the 750 level, a goal or a policy would be to increase the amount of renewable energy,
gonna-
including solar,
I know.
and then locally is how it gets
Okay.
implemented.
There's a little problem with the solar. Okay, first of all, unless you allow it to happen locally in the houses, the fields necessary are so large that you have to kiss off the Everglades or the bays. Okay, we have to allow, you know, if you want solar, it has to be locally done and you sell it back. All the roofs of South Florida in those little houses is the only chance we have to not do it in the Everglades. Okay, and the second thing is we need to have trajectories for new power lines. If the power is going to come not from FP&L, the current plants, we need new power lines. And when the new power lines happen, when the trajectories are set, that should be at the state level. Okay, typical of subsidiarity. If you ask every neighbor if you want a power line near their house, the answer is no. Okay, so you can't have new energy because you're asking at the wrong level of subsidiarity. That is an issue at the state level. And so that's typical of I think, the inability to compete with the Chinese. And by the way, there's a solar, I read a story about a person that was able to submit the first application for a solar field. In the same time, the same company built one 8 times the size in China. The first application took as long as building one 8 times the size in China. And that's what I mean about the lack of competition. Subsidiarity also determines that the lowest level at which some decisions are made are actually the state and not the neighbor, because we'll never get a new high tension power line in Florida again, which means we can't compete. And those are the things that will become clear.
And I think the same thing with the question on the east-west connectors. There will probably be some type of broad policy to make those east-west connectors more efficient, and then it'll dive down either to the regional planning level or the MPO level or the local government level of exactly how to accomplish that,
Right.
that goal. So again, it's the overall plan that will be implemented at a local level. And to answer Commissioner Taylor's question as well, each municipality, each county, when the plan is completed, will have a chance to review it and then to adopt it or not adopt it at that local level. So it will be reviewed by each municipality and county. And again, the implementation will probably be a combination of, okay, the plan says we should do this east-west connector. Locally, we want to do it. And because we're part of the 750 region, we can apply to DOT for a grant to help make it happen. But it will be driven at the local level with the full support of the local community and the local governing body.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, moved there in the early 60s. I lived in Pompano, Delray, now in Lake Worth. Right? Made my moves up the state. Every single time we talk about this moving. The rungs of the ladder are weak. And everything that happens trying to go east and west, you can't get people to get on that train and go from one city to the other because they're not going to go. I can get in my car and do much better than getting on a train right now.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman.
Right,
Right,
yeah.
so I'm just looking at you can bring it to our level, the local level. Yes, we would love to have that kind of, but we can't even get a tri-rail shuttle from our tri-rail to go down to our beach and come back
Right.
and pick up people.
Right.
So, I mean, this whole plan sounds great, but it's the lateral movement here that originally was from the ferries and so on that we were talking about. But how do we really look at this plan giving us some direction? It helps us at our local level make some sense of this.
And that would be exactly what would be in the plan as that recommendation, that those east-west connectors need to become more efficient, more friendly to the users, and to tie it in, just exactly how you described. Mr. Foley?
Just for a point of clarification, the board studying 750, which right now is 750, is 38 members, I believe, a cross-section of the entire southeast area, the 7 counties. It includes the Secretary of Transportation, presidents of the universities, members of hospital boards. And I'd like, just with a show of hands, how many people, both staff and members of Treasure Coast, who serve on 750 represent our area. Well, we have, as you can see, 12, looks like 10 or 12 folks from this area. And I joined because I wanted to be a part of the solution to problems that I know are coming. I know they're coming, and I'm a conservative Republican, so I'm not in this. Yes, I am. And so most of you know I served in the Reagan and Bush White Houses, so I'm not in this to do any liberal approach to our problems. I'm here to help solve problems, or to create a template for moving forward for the next 50 years. And I'm probably I'm one of the oldest people in the room. I'm almost 66. I remember what it was like 50 years ago, and it's very, very different now, and we have problems we couldn't even imagine 50 years ago. If we don't set a course for solving problems that we know are coming in 50 years, we're fooling ourselves. I think Andres hit the nail right on the head on so many of the issues facing us. We've got to go forward together to solve problems that are facing us.
Thank you. Commissioner Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the information you gave me was fine, but it really did not answer my question, which was who is going to implement this? Is it something that the Treasure Coast Planning Council is going to adopt? And if so, these meetings that we are holding are in the sunshine?
What I will tell you about that is after the 750 is finished and circulated among the local governments, the MPOs, the state agencies, the folks who we need really to buy into all of this, the Regional Planning Council will then take the parts out of it that it believes, the parts that it really believes based on the observations that are going to be made, the trends, the data, the analysis, and then the recommendations, and begin to amend our 20-year-old plan that we have, the Strategic Regional Policy Plan, with those new ideas and with those new observations, with that new data, and really with a new mission, okay, to position this region in a little better way so we can compete in the future. So, but at the end of the day, even if the Regional Planning Council changes its plan and adopts the 750 or big portions of it, at the end of the day, it's Palm Beach County, the 7 counties working together. It's the 200 cities working together, or at least finding some sort of common problem that they can work on together and thread.
Right.
All right? Work on together so that, in fact, we don't get outcompeted,
Yeah.
we don't get cannibalized, that we take advantage of all the opportunities that you just saw.
And I agree with you, Mike, but I
It'll
guess...
be the local governments who decide at the end, just like it is now with the regional plan.
Okay, but I guess because the meetings that we're holding is not open, you know, in the sunshine, if it is, we invite certain people to come to the meetings. It's
We
not.
invite everybody to come.
So we have 1 point, quite a bit of people in Palm Beach County, so you're saying everybody is invited? Who are they?
Everybody's invited, and in fact...
And your meetings are held in Fort Lauderdale or someplace else?
Just the executive committee meetings, just to do the business of the committee and make sure the finances are in order, make sure everything's straightened out, and make sure we're moving along on the right track, that the folks who are supervising the regional planning councils, which are a lot of members of this council, secretaries of the Department of Transportation, and business people out there, making sure that we're on track. They're basically contract managers. They're our supervision, really. But that group, those meetings are also open to the public and advertised as well.
Okay, so what you're saying is that even if that the Treasure Coast might adopt this plan, and if you adopt this plan, it will be done in the same manner as you're doing right now?
As the last 2 regional plans that this organization has adopted, it will be done in the public, in the sunshine. And hopefully it will transform this region into a region that at least is in a better position to compete.
So when we get to that point, when it gets to that point, it will be in the sunshine, because that's a major issue.
And in fact, there's even special meetings being held with the universities that are also advertised, with the economic councils. There's one coming up. And the third summit, by the way, if we don't get a chance to say, is scheduled, I think, June 19th through the 21st in Palm Beach County at the Convention Center. 3 days of public input, open to the public. Again, we're going to show some more as the data comes out, as more observations and trends are discovered. And
I think the key is to open it up to the public, because certainly the people of Florida, the areas that's affected, need to have an opportunity to input it.
I believe we had about, also our website, we've had about, what was it, 500,000 hits on our website?
Yeah, well, I don't
People who
know.
can access the website can access the website too. But we're holding as many meetings as we can, and they're all open to it.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes. I don't know if the mic is working or not. Oh, it's on, okay.
They're all on.
Basically, let me say this. When it comes to 750, I don't know if 750 is the way. I don't know if it isn't the way. But what I will say that, fortunately, we're in a position to position the generations that's coming behind us to create an opportunity for them to be more successful than previous generations. And whatever we're going to do, knowing that by 2030, we're looking at about 6 million people moving to the state of Florida. You're going to have transportation means in place. You're going to have the infrastructure in place. Right now, some of the major cities in the United States have some infrastructure problems based upon the fact that they did not change or redo the infrastructure on the maintenance of their transportation measures. These are some things that we got to consider. We're talking about billions of dollars that the government literally is going to have to spend in order to do so. The state of Florida is really a blank canvas. When it comes to being a blank canvas, we have the ability and the capacity to create a transportation measure that's second to none. So we definitely need to keep these things in mind as we're moving forward. I think Orlando and Miami benefits this region. And I think we ought to take advantage of every opportunity that we have based upon whatever's going on. And at the end of the day, because we do have the last say-so, and I believe home rule is in place, we can remotely move forward together collectively and come up with a vision and a plan that's beneficial for all 7 counties. And with that said, I see nothing wrong with preparing the future generations based upon our current success and drawing out a plan for them and a pattern for them to use and utilize as a means of their success moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Councilmember Foley and I are probably on different places of the political spectrum. I work for the Clinton White House. There's no daylight between us on where we are on 750. There's a lot of talk about property rights and property values and stuff. I think it is really about property rights. I think 50 years from now, if we're in a place where we can't move because of congestion, where we have deteriorating natural resources and a host of other problems that we're likely to have if we don't do something different than we're doing today, then I think all of our property values and our property rights are diminished, if not depleted. So I think we ought to keep that debate about property rights and property values going, because I think it's only one-sided here. 750 gives us an opportunity, I think. It doesn't guarantee us anything, but it gives us an opportunity. It's creating a framework for local governments, elected leaders, county commissioners, and mayors to make decisions in a broader context. It's not going to drive their decisions. It's not going to make them do anything. But it gives them a platform and a context to make better decisions on a larger basis. And so I'm puzzled by the opposition. I respect people's opinion, but I do believe as a 34-year professional planner that this is our best chance. And if we blow it today, we may not get back to this place.
Thank you. Commissioner Fielding?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel the reason, I'm from Martin County, and I feel strongly that the reason that Martin County became involved in the overall project, we wanted to make sure that there was input from our perspective that would affect the outcome. And we wanted to make sure that whatever the outcome was would be more in line with those goals and objectives and perspectives that we had. There's no question but what the 6.2 or 3 million people that live in the region are going to be significantly impacted from the approximately about 3 million that are going to move here. I don't know if it's 6 for the whole state, but it's 3 that are going to move down here. So that's going to be an enormous projected impact. And if we, in my view, if we just stand back and decide to build more schools and more homes and more roads, I believe we have neglected our responsibilities to try to think and to plan and to move forward with opportunities that will allow us not just to be a modest to declining economy, but hopefully to be an accelerating economy, providing for good jobs, good schools, and good homes for all of the people. Now, I said that, and then I said, some folks might think that that was a socialistic kind of, that wasn't, I didn't mean that the government's going to fund those things. I just meant in planning. Because what we're doing, as far as I understand, I'm on the executive committee of 750 as well, what I understood what we're doing is we're basically gathering data, information, and that information is then becoming more widely available to all units of cities or counties so that those decisions can be made more objectively with greater interactive awareness, and that's why we're here. And that's somewhat of a surprise. You know, we don't hear, well, I want to be down with Treasure Coast Regional Planning. You know, we take votes. We take votes. And sometimes those votes have negative impacts on other areas. 750 is not an activity where it's going to be an overwhelming vote situation, and if you don't like it, tough, we voted 3-2 and you lost. That's not what's happening. What's happening is I'm sorry, Peter, and I'll hurry. Okay. What's happening is that we're gathering information so that we might be better prepared to address these common concerns, these common opportunities for the future. So I see it some differently. I don't know. One of the things that's under discussion is a system. And some of the guys know me, and it's a fiber optic system, so you knew I had to bring that in. It's a system that's going to allow us to change our entire lifestyles if we wish, and make available these communication systems that people are benefiting now as they have high capacities on their iPads and cell phones and all this jazz. That's available because we're growing in our capabilities of fiber optics. So what I see us doing, and I think it's vital that there be a discussion, because there are differences of opinion. There's strong differences of opinion, and I think that it's important that that be a discussion, and that those differences, hopefully through discussion, are moderated. But during the very founding of this country, there was an enormous difference of opinion, and some were Federalists, some were Anti-Federalists. The Federalists won. But if we're not for the Anti-Federalists, we wouldn't have a Bill of Rights. So even at the very beginning of this nation, there has been a very different perspective. My perspective, and it happens to be that I think the government should do very little and not subsidize individuals, not subsidize corporate welfare, not do those things. That's my particular perspective. But there are others that may feel differently about that, and I think it's important that we have those fields of discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just so you know, I had the under of 3 minutes of when you would bring up fiber. I had the under, yeah, 3 minutes for that. Any other comments from the council? If not, we have a few speaking cards from the public. The first is Alex Larson.
I was praying for a board with nails in it during that presentation. Sorry. I mean, I'm listening to fascism. I'm listening to what a wonderful world Orlando is. Every time Orlando flushes a toilet, it goes into Lake Okeechobee. I don't know if you're aware of that. I mean, to hear this, I went to the 750 meeting and I watched the Delphi effect you all use. Everybody look it up. Look it up. You wouldn't even let people, you gave us 2 words to say. My words at your meeting were wounded and toxic. Wounded is now and toxic is 50 years from now. To say we're not responsible for the future is unbelievable to me. Because the whole reason I do what I do, and I don't even have any kids, and I will be 52 in July, and I have been here every year since I was 2 years old, is watching the destruction of Florida. If you think, well, who's going to pay for this? Miami was built on a pile of coke. That's a fact of life. The taxpayers are now taking care of this stuff. To hear the words, some of the words were unbelievable to listen to. It was like getting a knife in your eye. If you've lived here, I'm glad you think all those states are better. Go to Alabama. Go now. Go to the Mississippi River, which is going into the Gulf of Mexico. This pollution, to say the EPA and FDOT and HUD, oh my God, we had a Clean Water Act done in 1972 and Clean Air Act that doesn't even get followed. We've ignored it. I mean, this was really hard. This presentation was hard because we're very patient out here in the audience, but you're all going to leave at noon, and you've got 5 more things on the agenda that are, really, really worthwhile, and maybe we should read the backup to our stuff, but, digging deeper ports. Do you know what made America great? We were self-sustaining. We did not import the crap from China.
Please.
We're digging ports deeper to import more stuff. Why do we not have jobs in America? Because our blue-collar jobs are in China. We have got to rethink ourselves. I hope the board as a whole, I heard Priscilla, Ms. Taylor, when she said, it's sunshine, it's very difficult to talk about things, but you can send the email out to everybody. We need to make it here. That's what, growing up in America in the 50s and 60s was heaven. We've destroyed ourselves with Walmart. We wanted it cheaper and faster and better, but it wasn't cheaper. That's the funny part. It never got cheaper. That pair of jeans that goes around the world still costs you $80. So if we're going to pay $80 for a pair of jeans, why don't we make it in America? This crap about deepening ports and doing all this stuff, do it here. Why don't we do it here? And I've been saying this, I'm not just yelling at you. I go to the county commission in the South Florida Water Management District and everywhere else. But, I mean, please, of all things, grow some common sense and teach our children common sense. We're not even teaching our kids cursive writing anymore. We're taking away their critical thinking skills. Thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis Fry? Phyllis? No, Phyllis, I'm sorry, Rosa. Phyllis Fry. All right, Rosa?
Well, I'm going to remind you all, in case you don't know it, how long ago the Chinese decided they were overpopulated, but instead of shipping them to America, they limited the most limiting laws ever heard of, that a family could only have one child. How long do you think that would last in America, where we can't even support fully the right to choose? And the other thing, you need to read 2 books. One of them is Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and the other one is Uncle Tom's Cabin, and review the comments on Topsy and how she grew. There is a carrying capacity of the land. It's not political, like it or not. It's based in the facts of life. And there are certain things that we need to examine with a little bit of transparency and honesty. And it isn't the fact that we lack political will, it's the fact that we haven't recognized truly what the problems are, and we cannot solve them all.
Thank you, Rosa. Phyllis Fry. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you all. Stephanie Austin has offered to cede her 3 minutes to me with your approval.
Okay.
Thank you. As a retired airline pilot, I have spent my life based upon facts and data, not myths, not conjecture, translated into performance. This country has offered me every opportunity, and I hope I can tell my mother I haven't squandered it. And regardless of what someone says, it is still the greatest country. I beg to differ with your misperception, sir. And I've lived my life on a global level, and I understand globalism, okay? And I get the big picture. And I've seen regionalism and how it ends, and it never ends well. If you want to see it, you want to see an example of what your work is going to come to, book a flight to Moscow, go over to China, check it out. It never ends well. And Mr. Duany, am I pronouncing that right, Mr. Duany?
Yes, you are.
I do have a few questions. I'd like to know why it is you're not telling the public the truth. In your own words, you said that we're going to be transcending the local control. That bothers me. It makes me very uncomfortable. Your words, I guess you're filming this. The people here deserve to know the truth, and you're not representing the will of the people, by the way. This is a handful, all right? Where are the 6 million people that are going to have one voice? Where are they when you're educating the public, indoctrinating the public? 750 is comprised of over 200 unelected bureaucrats, give or take a few, central planners from outside our area, unvetted by us, who under regionalism are here to re-engineer our communities into something we no longer recognize and do not want. What's your mantra? Regionalism, one neighborhood at a time. Why is it, Mr. Duany, that you painted a lot of pretty pictures accompanied by a plethora of flowery words about utopian living? But the truth is that your sustainable community consists of clusters of low-income, high-density population, HUD, stack-and-pack high-rises with demographic quotas. Why haven't you said that wherever these sustainable communities have been implemented, such as in Poughkeepsie, New York, or Newark, or Westchester, is that crime, drugs, and prostitution have turned these communities into slums? Why don't you tell people how it really ends? It never ends well. Personally, as an American, I am offended by the fact that you and your regionalists would come here and attempt to decide how and where I live. Why don't you tell the people here today the truth? And your concept of a sustainable community is all about control. In your own words, don't include the public. Why don't you tell the people that your concept of how and where we live consists of tiny, compressed living spaces that will replace our right to own single-family homes? The shocking truth. Why don't you tell them that your vision of our future will not be decided by the public, but by your organization, 750, meaning control of 7 counties within 50 years? Why don't you tell them all of this? will be done without their knowledge, without their vote, without their consent, but with their tax dollars. By the way, this is splendid. Could someone please tell me how much all of this costs? And you're all dressed very well. And where are the members of the public? You are not representing the will of the people unless you've talked to 6 million, or at least half of them plus one. Why don't you tell the folks that your central planners are promoting regional tax base sharing, a practice through which suburban money, through extreme taxing measures, will be directly redistributed to these sustainable communities? Why don't you tell them that your vision plan will force private homeowners who will no longer be able to afford the high taxes and will have to move into your sustainable communities? And why don't you tell them, Mr. Duany, that under the false science of environmentalism, I noticed how you tried to diminish that. That will be, but the EPA won't diminish it, because you'll be working hand in glove under new regulations by the EPA, that their private homes with their individually controlled air conditioners and wasteful irrigated lawns are no longer sustainable, and that under your plan, cars with their dirty carbon footprints are also deemed unsustainable. But that's okay. We'll all be living near mass transit in your sustainable community next to the rail system, and you will take care of all our needs. We can go everywhere by foot or bicycle. Again, tour to China. See how it works out. And you are a planner who knows better than we what is best for us. And why don't you tell them, Mr. Duany, that you will not be living in the sustainable community, but your children and your grandchildren will? And why don't you tell them, Mr. Duany, that your sustainable community does not promote jobs, it creates massive government dependency, it erodes capitalism in the community, it is not an American idea, and it is not good for America. And why don't you tell them, Mr. Duany, that 750 bypasses Congress, contravenes our Constitution, circumvents the state level, and takes away the decision-making by our locally elected officials, in your own words? And why don't you tell these people, Ms. Duany, that you do not care about our preferences for living, and that all you do care about is protecting your job using public funds, our tax dollars, for private use? Oh, and just one or two more questions, Ms. Duany. By the way, I am not a Tea Party member, okay? So who is paying your salary, and how much do you earn? I hope I'm going to wait for your answers on that, since I'm footing the bill. All right, and those are my tax dollars paying your salary or yours. So I think I have the right to know how much we are paying for this, for you to tell me how and where I should live. One note in closing: America's broke. So your dreamy ideas about rail systems, there's not one rail system in America that operates at a profit. Amtrak is subsidized at a rate of 90% per dollar. And they buy a hamburger for $9 and sell it for $6. I rest my case.
Thank you. Please, folks. Drew Martin.
Mr. Chair, could we ask the speakers not direct comments to a specific individual? I don't think it's appropriate. I think as a courtesy, the comments need to be addressed to the content, not individuals.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Mr. Martin, welcome.
Drew Martin. I'm going to speak on behalf of myself. And I think if you were trying to sell this concept, that today you failed to sell this concept. And I don't have a dog in this fight, because I'm not convinced that this 750 program is all that great, but I'm not totally against it. But I think today, if somebody walked in this room today and they didn't have an idea, they would be against this program after hearing this presentation. I'm not directing that at the speaker, I'm just speaking in general. Why would they be against it? Because the language used today was inflammatory and insulting. We fought World War II against fascism. I really don't want to hear a speaker get up and say that they support fascism. I think that's unprofessional.
People, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not directing this at the individual, but I found that disconcerting. I also think this approach and I can't remember his, I'm sorry I'm not directing it to him, but I'm directing it to the presentation. There's a term that was used that says you need some little small group to make all the decisions. And I think that will frighten people who are already concerned about the process. When you present a process and make the statement that we're going to take this whole process and we're going to take a little teeny group, and that little teeny group is going to make all the decisions. I think Commissioner Taylor asked valid questions because I think this process is unclear. And I think what Commissioner Taylor asked was a very good question. So I think you need to go back and you need to look at how you're going to present this. Because if you present this concept the way you presented it today, you're not going to get public buy-in. And I'll just say, you want to talk about China, people, I just read an article, people are moving out of China because the pollution is so bad, people can't, their kids have to play inside an igloo. So I don't think you want to present that as the ideal of where we want to go. And I don't like the other term about ruthless capitalism because I don't think that's the free market system we support. We support good products made by good people for a good price, and I don't think that's ruthless. The last thing I'm going to say is I agree with Ms. Larson. We need to manufacture here in the United States, and we need to focus on doing that and not plan to buy everything somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Andreas, thank you again for your presentation. We're going to go ahead and move on with the agenda. We had moved up item 9, so Memorandum of Understanding for the Tri-Rail Coastal Link. And Kim?
In the interest of time, instead of making a presentation, Kim Delaney from Council staff. What you have before you is a memorandum of